What would you do if the most humiliating text of your life went to the one person who could fire you? At 11:48 p.m., single father Ethan Mercer sat beneath a flickering kitchen light with $46 in his bank account, an eviction notice on the table, and his 9-year-old daughter asleep down the hall. His overtime still hadn't been paid. His rent was 3 days late, so Ethan swallowed his pride and typed one desperate message. "Can I pay rent next Friday?" He meant to send it to his landlord. Instead, it went to Claire Whitmore, the powerful CEO of the company he worked for. Ethan expected silence, humiliation, maybe termination. Her reply changed everything. "Stay with this story because one wrong message is about to expose far more than unpaid rent. Like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from." Her reply changed everything. But to understand why those few words on Ethan Mercer's phone mattered so much, you had to understand what his life looked like before Claire Whitmore ever knew his name. 18 hours earlier, before the eviction notice, before the desperate text, before Ethan stood staring at a message from the most powerful woman in the company, his day had begun at 5:12 in the morning in a narrow apartment kitchen outside Pittsburgh. The alarm on his phone vibrated against the counter. Ethan opened his eyes on the couch. For a few seconds he did not move. His neck hurt from sleeping at the wrong angle. One sock was still on. The television had gone dark sometime during the night, leaving the room lit only by the orange glow of a street lamp beyond the blinds. Then he remembered why he had slept there. Sophie had crawled into his bed after a nightmare. She had not wanted to be alone, so Ethan had given her the bed and told himself he would only lie down on the couch for a minute. He sat up, rubbed both hands over his face, and looked toward the hallway. Quiet. Good. He had less than an hour before he needed to leave for work. The apartment was small enough that Ethan could make breakfast without turning on many lights. He moved through the kitchen from memory-opening cupboards slowly so they would not creak. 3 eggs, 4 pieces of bread, almost no milk. He looked at the carton, shook it once, then set it back. Coffee would have to be black. Again. He cracked the eggs into a pan. The sound woke Sophie anyway. She appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing an oversized Pittsburgh Penguins shirt and pink pajama pants, her brown hair tangled around her face. "You said you'd wake me." Ethan glanced at the clock. "It's 5:20. I know. You're 9. I also know that. You're not supposed to be awake at 5:20. She walked to the table and sat down. "You're awake. I pay taxes." Sophie thought about that. "That sounds terrible." "It is. Go back to bed." She did not move. Ethan turned back to the stove so she would not see him smile. "You have school in 3 hours, and you have work in 1. That is different, because you pay taxes exactly." She accepted this with a small nod. Ethan divided the eggs between 2 plates. He gave Sophie most of them. She noticed. She always noticed. "You forgot yours." "I ate already." She looked at the untouched frying pan. "Dad." He reached for a piece of toast. "There. Breakfast." Sophie pushed half her eggs toward the edge of her plate. "I'm not that hungry." Ethan looked at her. She looked back. Neither of them said what they both knew. He scraped some of the eggs onto his plate. Happy very. For a minute, the apartment felt normal. The radiator clicked against the wall. A bus groaned somewhere down the street. Rain streaked the window above the sink. Sophie told him about a science project involving baking soda vinegar and what she described as a completely safe amount of red food coloring. Ethan told her there was no such thing as a completely safe amount of red food coloring. Then he found her school permission slip beneath a pile of mail. "You need this today, I told you yesterday. You told me while I was fixing the sink. You said you were listening." "I was listening." "What's the trip?" Ethan looked at the paper. "Carnegie Science Center." Sophie folded her arms. "You weren't listening. I was listening emotionally. That does not count. It counts when you are a parent." He signed the form. Then he saw the line beneath it. "Field trip fee, $28. He kept his expression still. Sophie watched him. "We don't have to pay today. It says today. Mrs. Delaney said Friday is okay." Ethan looked at her. "Did you ask her?" Sophie shrugged. "I just told her you work a lot. Something about the sentence hurt more than it should have." Ethan folded the form carefully. "I'll take care of it." "I know." He set it on the counter beside his keys. Then Sophie turned around. "My hair." Ethan froze. "No. Yes, your hair is fine. It looks like I got electrocuted. I work with electricity. I know what that looks like. You're fine. Dad. 10 minutes later, Ethan stood behind Sophie with a hairbrush in one hand and his phone in the other, watching a tutorial he had already watched 4 times. He attempted 2 braids. One came out reasonably straight. The other leaned sideways as if trying to escape. Sophie stared at herself in the microwave door. Dad, what? One side looks like it lost a fight. Ethan sighed. Stay still, she smiled. By 5:49, the braids were acceptable. Barely. Ethan kissed the top of her head. Mrs. Campbell from across the hall would knock at 7 and walk Sophie to the bus stop just as she did every morning. Ethan worked early. Ethan hated depending on anyone. But he trusted Mrs. Campbell. She had raised 3 children of her own, survived 2 husbands, and considered Ethan's inability to braid hair a personal insult. He pulled on his work jacket. Sophie followed him to the door. You're coming home before I go to sleep. Ethan hesitated. That tiny pause was enough. You said you would. I'm going to try. That means no. It means I'm going to try. She looked down. Ethan crouched in front of her. Hey, she looked at him. I know I've been working a lot. You always work a lot. I know. Is it because of money? The question caught him harder than any adult question could have. Ethan forced a smile. It's because boilers are stupid. Sophie did not smile back. You say everything is because boilers are stupid. That's because boilers are responsible for most human suffering. That finally got a small laugh. He kissed her forehead. I'll call before dinner. Promise, promise. He left before she could ask anything else. His truck started on the 3rd turn of the key. Ethan sat behind the wheel while the engine shook. The fuel gauge sat just above empty. He calculated the distance to work, then back home, then the school, then payday. Every calculation in his life had become a negotiation. He pulled onto the wet street. Downtown Pittsburgh was still gray when he reached Whitmore Property and Infrastructure Group's Tower 7. The building rose over the river in steel and glass polished enough to reflect the clouds. Ethan entered through the service dock. He preferred that entrance. The front lobby had marble floors, abstract sculptures, and people who looked at work boots like they were a maintenance problem. The service corridor smelled like concrete dust and hot metal. That made sense to him. By 6:40, he was 20 feet below the lobby floor with his hands inside a control panel. The heating system had been failing intermittently for nearly a week. The official maintenance software showed nothing. The boiler disagreed. It rattled hard enough to shake the pipes above it. Marcus Bell, another technician, stood beside Ethan with a flashlight. The ticket says repaired. Ethan tightened a probe against a terminal. The computer is an optimist. Marcus looked at the vibrating pipe. You think the boiler knows it's repaired? Someone should tell it. A pressure reading jumped. Ethan's expression changed. He shut off power to one section. The rattling slowed. Marcus leaned closer. Bad valve. Maybe worse. Ethan checked the sensor history. Somebody had cleared the previous fault entries. He knew because he had entered 2 of them himself. He opened a new ticket. Critical heating pressure instability. Immediate inspection required. Marcus watched him type. You keep doing that, Shaw's going to lose his mind. He should be more worried about the valve losing its mind. I'm serious. So am I. Ethan submitted the report. 15 minutes later, the ticket disappeared. Not closed. Gone. Ethan stared at the tablet. Marcus saw his face. What Ethan refreshed the screen? Nothing. The ticket no longer existed. Footsteps approached behind them. Derek Shaw entered the mechanical room carrying a coffee and a tablet. 45 neat, hair-clean boots. That always bothered Ethan. Nobody who spent real time around mechanical equipment had boots that clean. Derek looked at the boiler. Still chasing ghosts, Ethan held up the tablet. You deleted the ticket. I corrected the ticket. The pressure valve is unstable. According to what my meter. Derek tapped his own screen. According to the system, the unit passed inspection. Ethan looked at the machine shaking behind him. The machine didn't read the system. Marcus looked away. Derek lowered his coffee. There's a cost review happening upstairs. That doesn't change the pressure reading. Engineering is over budget. That doesn't change it either. Maintenance calls are up. Material expenses are up. Labor hours are up. From where headquarters is sitting, your department looks like it burns money and complains about being cold. Ethan folded his arms. Maybe headquarters should come downstairs. Derek smiled without humor. You want some advice, no? You're getting it anyway. He stepped closer. Stop creating problems that other people have already decided are solved. Ethan glanced toward the boiler. If that valve fails, somebody could get hurt. Derek's face hardened. Then you better hope it doesn't. For several seconds, neither man moved. Then Derek turned to Marcus. Go check the loading dock sensors. Marcus hesitated. Ethan gave him a small nod. Marcus left. Derek waited until the door closed. You've got a kid, right? Ethan's jaw tightened. Derek sipped his coffee. Single dad. Ethan said nothing. That means schedules matter to you. What are you saying? I'm saying hours are never guaranteed. Ethan stared at him. The threat was soft enough to deny later. That was Derek's favorite kind. Derek walked out. Ethan looked back at the control panel. He reopened his personal notebook. Date, time, pressure reading, ticket number. Deleted. He had started keeping handwritten notes 3 months earlier, not because he thought anyone would listen, because somebody had to remember what actually happened. At 11:20, Ethan checked his paycheck during lunch. The numbers did not add up. Again. 26 overtime hours were missing. He pulled his previous stub from an envelope inside his backpack. 14 hours missing there. The check before that had been short, too. He added the numbers on the back of a vending machine receipt. Enough money to cover his rent. Enough to cover Sophie's field trip. Enough to fix the truck heater. Money he had already earned. Ethan walked upstairs to payroll. The woman behind the desk was named Carla Nguyen. She had helped him once before. She entered his employee number. Her eyebrows tightened. It shows paid. It wasn't. She rotated the monitor slightly. 26 overtime hours. Processed, released, completed. Ethan pulled up his banking app. No deposit. Carla checked another screen. Maybe there's a delay. For 3 pay periods. She looked at him, then lowered her voice. You're not the only one. Ethan paused. What does that mean? Carla glanced toward the hallway. 2 electricians came in this week. Same thing. System says paid. They say they never got it. Did you file a correction? I tried. And her eyes shifted again. Before she could answer, a voice came from behind Ethan. Payroll trouble, Derek. Carla immediately turned back to her screen. Ethan faced him. Missing overtime. Derek looked surprised in a way that felt rehearsed. Still, you knew. You mentioned it. I mentioned it once. Then I have a good memory. Carla clicked something. I'll send it up for review. Ethan looked at her. She would not meet his eyes. Derek put a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Come on, we've got work. Ethan removed Derek's hand. I know where the work is. He walked out. On the elevator down, he checked his bank balance. $49. Then the truck payment hit. $46.17. He locked the phone. His lunch was still in his backpack. He was not hungry anymore. At 2:13, Sophie's school called. Ethan stepped into a stairwell. Mr. Mercer? Yes. This is Karen from St. Matthew's after-school program. Ethan already knew. The payment. Yes. We just wanted to remind you the account needs to be brought current. I get paid Friday. There was a pause. We can hold the spot until then. Thank you. Of course. Ethan leaned his head against the concrete wall. Is Sophie there? She's in class. Right. Would you like me to tell her you called? No? He looked at his work gloves. No, that's okay. He hung up. When his shift officially ended at 5, Ethan did not leave. The boiler problem was still there. Derek had marked it resolved. Ethan stayed. 6 became 7. 7 became 9. Marcus left first. You coming soon. You said that yesterday. I know. You getting paid for this? Ethan looked at him. Marcus understood. That bad? Go home, Marcus. Marcus hesitated. Don't let them make you stupid, man. Ethan gave him a tired smile. I was stupid before I got here. Marcus left. At 10:36, Ethan finally isolated the fault. A control relay was intermittently locking a pressure valve in the wrong position. He photographed everything. He recorded the serial number. He saved the diagnostic file to the company system, then to his personal drive. He had begun making copies after too many reports vanished. Ethan did not think of himself as collecting evidence. He thought of it as refusing to forget. By the time he reached the parking garage, rain had become steady. His truck did not start. He turned the key again. Nothing. Come on. Again. A weak click. Ethan rested his forehead against the steering wheel. For one moment he stayed there. No movement, no anger, just exhaustion. Then he got out, opened the hood, and found a security guard willing to help jump the battery. The heater barely worked during the drive home. He kept both hands tight on the wheel to keep them warm. Millstone Gardens came into view just after midnight. 3 brick buildings, a cracked parking lot, half the exterior lights burned out. Home. Ethan climbed the stairs quietly. He unlocked the apartment. The kitchen light was on. Sophie had fallen asleep at the table. Math homework lay beneath one hand. Beside it sat a drawing in colored pencil. 2 people stood in front of a crooked house. A tall man with dark hair, a small girl beside him. Above them in uneven purple letters, Sophie had written, "Our place." Ethan stood there for a long time. Then he lifted her carefully. Sophie stirred against his shoulder. "You're late. I know. You promised. I know." Her eyes stayed closed. "Boilers," Ethan swallowed. "Boilers." She rested her head against him again. He carried her to bed, tucked the blanket under her chin, then returned to the kitchen. That was when he noticed the envelope beneath the front door. Millstone Gardens Management. He opened it. The first line made his stomach drop. Full payment required within 72 hours. Outstanding rent, late fee, failure to pay would begin eviction proceedings. Ethan read it once, then again, then a third time. $46.17 sat in his bank account. 26 missing overtime hours sat on a computer screen somewhere inside Whitmore headquarters marked paid. He folded the notice, placed it on the table, then unfolded it again. He thought about calling Linda Foster, the property manager. He hated the idea, not because Linda was cruel, because asking made the situation real. Ethan had spent years solving problems himself. When Sophie needed braces, he worked weekends. When the truck transmission failed, he learned how to replace half of it with Marcus in a freezing garage. When daycare got too expensive, he changed shifts. When his life narrowed, he narrowed with it. He did not ask, but 72 hours was not a problem he could repair with a wrench. He opened his phone, typed Linda's name, started a message, deleted it, started again. He explained payroll, deleted that. He apologized, deleted that too. Finally, he wrote the simplest version he could manage. "Linda, I hate asking this, but payroll still hasn't fixed my overtime. Can I pay the rent next Friday instead? I'll cover everything. I just need a few more days." His thumb hovered over the screen. From the hallway came Sophie's sleepy voice. Dad. Ethan locked the phone. She stood there wrapped in her blanket. "What are you doing?" "Nothing, that's not true." He smiled. "You're supposed to be sleeping." She walked closer. Her eyes went to the paper on the table. Ethan covered it with his hand. Sophie noticed that too. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, you only say yeah like that when it isn't." He looked at her. 9 years old, too smart, too observant, too used to watching him pretend. It's just boring grown-up stuff. Bad, boring grown-up stuff. He hesitated. No. She studied him, then hugged him around the waist. Ethan closed his eyes. "You should sleep, so should you. I will. That also means no." He laughed softly. "Go." Sophie walked back toward her room. At the doorway she turned. "Dad, yeah, we're still staying here, right?" Ethan looked at the eviction notice beneath his hand. "Yes." He said it before he knew whether it was true. Sophie nodded. "Okay." She disappeared down the hallway. Ethan sat alone. Then he unlocked the phone. He pressed send. A second later he saw the recipient. Claire Whitmore. His blood went cold. The name had appeared in his contacts after a winter power emergency the year before when executive numbers were included in a company-wide alert. He stared at the screen. The message was delivered. No. He opened the thread. Claire Whitmore, Chief Executive Officer. He typed immediately. "Ms. Whitmore, I am so sorry. That message was not intended for you." Then another. "Please disregard it. This was completely accidental." Then another. "I apologize for bothering you." Nothing. 3 minutes. 4. Ethan imagined human resources calling before sunrise, Derek hearing about it, the story reaching the department. Single dad begs CEO for rent money. He put the phone face down. It vibrated. He grabbed it. Claire Whitmore. "Why hasn't your overtime been paid?" Ethan stared. Another message. "Do not pay your rent tonight. Then 7:00 a.m. headquarters brings 6 months of pay statements. One final message appeared. Come alone. Ethan slept less than 2 hours. At 6:42 the next morning, he stood outside Whitmore headquarters wearing the only shirt he owned that could pass for office appropriate. Gray, recently ironed, still slightly wrinkled at the elbows. His tie had belonged to his father. He had tied it 3 times. The lobby ceiling rose nearly 4 stories. Polished stone reflected the morning light. People crossed the floor carrying coffee in leather bags. Ethan looked down at his work shoes. He had polished them with a kitchen towel. They still looked like work shoes. The receptionist checked her computer. Name Ethan Mercer. Company I work here. She looked up. Department Building Engineering. And you're here to see? He swallowed. Claire Whitmore. The receptionist stared at him. Ms. Whitmore, that's what the message says. She made one phone call. Then another. Finally, her expression changed. 41st floor, the elevator doors closed around Ethan. He held 6 months of bank statements and pay stubs against his chest. 10 floors, 20, 30. At 38, he considered pressing the emergency stop. At 41, the doors opened. A woman in a navy suit approached. Mr. Mercer, yes, follow me. No smile, no explanation. She led him through a corridor so quiet Ethan could hear the sound of his own shoes. At the end was a glass conference room overlooking Pittsburgh. Claire Whitmore stood at the window. Ethan had seen her before, on company videos, in newspapers, at employee meetings where she spoke from a stage and disappeared before most workers could reach the lobby. In person, she seemed smaller than the image the company had built around her. But the room still changed when she turned. She wore a dark suit, no unnecessary jewelry. Her expression revealed almost nothing. Ethan entered. The door closed behind him. No attorney, no human resources representative, no security, just Claire, a folder, and him. Ethan started immediately. Ms. Whitmore, I want to apologize again. That message was not meant for you. I was exhausted and I selected the wrong contact. I would never intentionally bring something personal to your attention, and I understand if that crossed a line. Claire watched him. You think I called you here because you asked to pay rent late? Ethan stopped. I don't know why you called me here. That makes 2 of us. She gestured to the chair. Sit. Ethan sat. Claire slid a folder across the table. Open it. He did. The first page carried the Whitmore logo. Temporary Employee Housing Protection Policy. Signed by Claire Whitmore 11 months earlier. Ethan read the first paragraph. Then the second. Claire spoke. Whitmore manages Millstone Gardens. Yes, this policy applies to employees living in properties we manage. Ethan kept reading. Employees experiencing income disruption caused by payroll delay or employer scheduling changes could not be subject to eviction action during the protected period. He looked up. Claire tapped his eviction notice. You should never have received this. Ethan said nothing. Claire opened another file. Now this. Payroll history. Ethan recognized his employee number. She pointed at the overtime entries. 26 hours, paid. 14 hours, paid. 18 hours, paid. Ethan slowly opened his own bank statements. He placed them beside the company records. The numbers did not match. Claire sat down across from him. Did you alter these statements? Ethan looked at her. No. Did anyone in payroll tell you the company records were wrong? They said the money was paid. Was it no? How many other employees have this problem? I don't know. That isn't what I asked. Ethan held her gaze. At least 2 that payroll mentioned. Probably more. Claire was quiet. Who supervises your regional group, Derek Shaw? Any problems with him? Ethan almost laughed. Instead, he looked through the glass walls toward the city. Claire noticed. What he said, nothing. What are you afraid of Mr. Mercer losing hours? You're already losing wages. That's not the same thing. Claire leaned back. No. Ethan looked at her. If you lose this meeting, you go back to another meeting. Claire's expression changed slightly. If I lose my hours, my daughter loses groceries. The room went silent. Ethan realized what he had said. I apologize. Claire did not respond to the apology. Instead, she asked, what else is being changed? Ethan's eyes narrowed. What makes you think something else is being changed? Because 3 separate payroll discrepancies do not explain why a protected tenant received an eviction warning. Ethan said nothing. Claire waited. It was not warmth that made him trust her. It was patience. She did not fill the silence. Finally, Ethan reached into his bag. He placed a small flash drive on the table. Claire looked at it. "What is that copies? Of what maintenance reports? How many a lot? Why do you have them?" Ethan looked through the glass at the skyline again. "Because reports I filed kept disappearing." Claire's expression hardened. "Disappearing how safety findings changed. Labor hours reduced. Parts added to invoices that I never installed. Did you report this to Derek?" And he suggested I stop noticing. Claire looked at the drive. "You kept copies anyway. If somebody gets hurt, I'm not letting them say nobody warned them." Claire reached toward the drive, then stopped. "May I?" Ethan nodded. She picked it up. "Does Derek know you have these?" "I don't think so." "You don't think so?" "That's the best answer I can give you." Claire pressed a button on the conference table. "Rachel, I need you in here." Ethan frowned. "Who's Rachel Internal Audit?" He looked at her sharply. "I thought this was about payroll. So did I." The door opened several minutes later. Rachel Monroe entered carrying a tablet and a legal pad. She looked at Claire, then Ethan, then the flash drive. Claire gave her the shortest possible explanation. Rachel listened without interrupting. When Claire finished, Rachel picked up the drive. She did not plug it in. Instead, she looked directly at Ethan. "How do we know you didn't manufacture these files yourself?" Claire started to speak. Ethan answered first. "You don't." Rachel watched him carefully. Ethan pushed the drive closer to her. "Check the timestamps. Check my badge entries. Check the camera logs. Check the device IDs on the reports. Check every invoice against every piece of equipment in those buildings." Rachel's expression remained unreadable. Ethan leaned back. "If I made any of it up, you'll find out." For the first time that morning, Claire said nothing. Rachel looked down at the drive in her hand, then back at Ethan, and the room became very quiet. Rachel did not smile. She turned the flash drive once between her fingers, as if its weight might tell her whether Ethan was telling the truth. Then she looked at Claire. "I want his access history." Claire nodded. "Get it. Camera records too, whatever you need." Rachel looked back at Ethan. "And I want the original device identifiers from every report on this drive." Ethan leaned forward. "You'll find them. That is what people usually say when they want me to stop looking. I'm asking you to look harder." Something in Rachel's expression shifted. Not trust, not yet, but interest. She slipped the drive into an evidence bag. "You will not contact anyone in your department about this." Ethan gave a tired laugh. "You think I was planning to send out invitations?" Rachel ignored it. "If anybody asks why you were here, you had a payroll issue. That part is true. For now, truth is useful." Ethan stood. Claire watched him gather his pay statements. "Mr. Mercer." He looked back. "You are still working tonight?" "Yes." "At the same properties?" "Yes." Claire seemed uncomfortable with the answer. Ethan noticed. "You wanted to know what happens downstairs. I do. Then somebody still has to go downstairs." He left before she could respond. For the next 6 hours, Rachel Monroe did exactly what Ethan had asked. She tried to prove him wrong. She pulled security footage from Tower 7. She compared Ethan's badge records to the creation times on his reports. She matched serial numbers from photographs to equipment inventory. She checked the internal metadata on each maintenance ticket. Then she checked the company copies of the same tickets. At 2:17 that afternoon, she found the first discrepancy. Ethan had filed a report on February 7th. The original read, "Critical pressure fault. Immediate repair required." The version stored in Whitmore's central system read, "Routine fluctuation. Monitor only." Rachel opened the revision history. The change had been made 43 minutes after Ethan submitted the report. Administrator credentials, Derek Shaw. She found another, then another. One fire suppression inspection had been altered from incomplete to passed. A broken emergency generator had been marked repaired 3 days before Ethan's notes said it was even inspected. Labor hours disappeared from maintenance tickets after employees signed them. Parts were added that no technician had requested. Rachel stopped looking for evidence that Ethan was lying. She started looking for the shape of the truth. By 6 in the evening, Claire was still in her office. The city outside her windows had become a field of lights. Rachel entered without knocking. Claire looked up immediately. Well, Rachel placed 3 folders on her desk. "His records are real." Claire sat back. How real the creation data matches company-issued devices. His badge history matches every site. Cameras show him entering the mechanical rooms at the same times those reports were created. And the company copies changed later, by Derek. Some of them. Claire's eyes narrowed. Some Rachel opened the second folder. There is something else. She turned a page toward Claire. Invoices. Claire recognized the vendor name. Allegheny Technical Services. They have contracts with us. They have invoices with us. Claire looked up. Rachel continued. I have not established that they have actually performed the work. How much in the records I pulled today? Just over $700,000. Claire went still. Rachel tapped a line item. This one is Tower 7, replacement labor for a control assembly. Claire read the amount. Who performed it according to the invoice Allegheny Technical Services? And according to Ethan, Rachel turned the page. Ethan Mercer. That evening, Ethan was back beneath Tower 7. The boiler room smelled like oil and hot dust. Marcus was replacing a sensor when Ethan came in. You survived the palace. Ethan stopped. What? Marcus gestured upward. Derek said you were called downtown. Payroll. That what they call it now. Ethan took off his jacket. What did Derek say? Not much. Marcus looked at him. That is what worries me. Ethan opened the tool cabinet. Forget it. Easy for you to say. No, Marcus. It isn't. Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded. Fine. Ethan crouched beside the boiler. The same pressure reading he had documented the day before had been cleared again. He stared at the screen. Another missing warning. Another clean report. He opened his notebook and wrote the time. Behind him, Marcus said quietly, My last check was short too. Ethan stopped writing. How much? 11 hours. Did you go to payroll? Derek told me not to. Ethan turned. What exactly did he say? Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. Said there was a software problem and anybody making noise before it got fixed could make themselves look difficult. Ethan looked at him. Marcus gave a humorless smile. I have 2 kids. Difficult is expensive. Ethan knew exactly what he meant. His phone buzzed. Sophie. He stepped away from the machines before answering. Hey, Bug. You said you'd call before dinner. Ethan glanced at the clock. 7:26. I did. No, you didn't. Then I am calling during dinner. That is not the same thing. What are you eating? Mac and cheese. Vegetable silence. Sophie, cheese is made from milk. That is not a vegetable. It comes from cows. Cows eat grass. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. That is not how nutrition works. It could be. He smiled despite himself. Homework done almost. What does almost mean? It means I am waiting for my very intelligent father to explain fractions. Ethan looked at the boiler. You may be waiting a long time. She laughed. The sound softened something in him. Then Sophie asked, Did the boring grown-up stuff get better? Ethan looked down at his boots. Maybe. Maybe good or maybe bad, I don't know yet. She was quiet. Are you coming home tonight? Yes. You promise? This time he answered immediately. Yes. When Ethan ended the call, Marcus was pretending not to have listened. You talk different with her. Ethan put the phone away. Everybody does. No. You sound like a person. Ethan threw the rag at him. Marcus laughed. At 9:10, Ethan's phone rang again. Claire Whitmore. He stared at the screen before answering. Ms. Whitmore, are you still at Tower 7? Yes. Can you leave without attracting attention? Ethan looked toward Marcus. Probably. Come to the garage entrance on Liberty Avenue. Why? There was a brief pause. I want to see one of the properties. Ethan frowned. Tonight? Yes. You could send Rachel. I could. Then why aren't you? Claire's voice remained calm. Because yesterday you told me headquarters should come downstairs. Ethan said nothing. Claire continued. I listened. 30 minutes later, Ethan stepped out onto Liberty Avenue. A black company car was nowhere in sight. Instead, Claire stood beside an ordinary gray sedan wearing jeans boots and a dark coat. Ethan stopped. She looked at his expression. What I've never seen a CEO dressed like somebody who might touch a wrench. I'm not touching a wrench. That is probably wise. She almost smiled. Almost. Ethan got into the passenger seat. Claire drove. No assistant, no driver, no security. The city looked different from the ground. They crossed the river and headed toward McKee's Rocks. Claire glanced at him. Rachel confirmed the reports were altered. Ethan looked out the window. I told you they were. She also found invoices from Allegheny Technical Services. That name again. You know them, no. They billed us for work at Tower 7, how much Claire told him. Ethan turned toward her. For what control assembly replacement? I replaced that assembly. When January? Were contractors present? Now Claire gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. Did you receive overtime for it? Ethan laughed once. No. Neither spoke for several blocks. At Millstone Gardens, Claire parked near the far end of the lot. The building looked tired under the streetlights, brick stained dark by rain. One hallway window cracked and taped, a porch light flickering above the entrance. Claire looked up at it. This is one of ours. Ethan opened the door. Yes, inside the first thing Claire noticed was the heat, or the lack of it. The hallway was cold enough that she could see a faint cloud when Ethan exhaled. A woman in slippers came out of apartment 2B carrying a trash bag. She looked at Ethan. Boiler again, checking it. Her eyes shifted to Claire. Management. Claire hesitated. Ethan answered first. She's helping me inspect. The woman gave Claire a tired look. Well, inspect faster. My grandson sleeps here Thursday. She walked away. Claire watched her go. They continued down the hall. 3 doors had notices taped to them. Claire stopped at the first. Payment demand. Final warning. She read the heading. Whitmore Residential Management. Her own company. This violates the housing protection policy. Ethan looked at her. I know. They cannot issue this. They did. Claire read another. Then another. All 3. Those are the ones on this floor. She looked toward him. How many total, I don't know. That is not an acceptable answer. Ethan held her gaze. It's the only honest one I have. Claire looked away. They continued downstairs. The basement door groaned when Ethan pushed it open. The temperature dropped immediately. Claire followed him into a narrow mechanical corridor. Pipes ran overhead. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Ethan turned on the lights. Old fluorescent tubes flickered awake. At the far end sat 2 massive boilers. Rust streaked the casings. One pump rattled against its mount. Claire opened the folder Rachel had given her. According to these invoices, both boilers were replaced last year. Ethan walked to the nearest unit. He wiped grime from a metal plate. Read the serial number. Claire leaned closer. The plate was scratched, but visible. She compared it to the historical equipment inventory. Her face changed. 11 years old, yes. The invoice says new, yes. Claire looked at the second boiler. Same 10 years. How much did Whitmore pay? She checked. Her voice came out quieter. $382,000. Ethan tapped the boiler casing. This has never left the room. Claire stared at the machine. The sound of the pump filled the silence. For the first time since Ethan had met her, she looked less like a chief executive than a person trying to understand how something carrying her family name could exist without her knowing it. Ethan did not soften the truth. You signed the policy upstairs. Claire looked at him. You signed the maintenance standards upstairs. I know, you approved the budgets upstairs. Her jaw tightened. Mr. Mercer. He pointed toward the ceiling. A signature 40 floors above the ground doesn't keep anybody warm down here. The words hung between them. Claire looked around the basement. Old pipes, leaking valves, improvised repairs, equipment the company claimed no longer existed. After a moment, she said my father used to visit every property himself. Ethan said nothing. When I took over, there were 142 buildings. That is a lot of basements. Claire looked at him. I thought reports were the only way to manage them. They are useful. You do not sound convinced. They are useful if the person writing them is not being paid to lie. Claire exhaled slowly. That was deserved. They left the mechanical room and headed upstairs. Near the lobby, they found an older woman packing dishes into cardboard boxes. Ethan knew her. Mrs. Alvarez. She looked up. Ethan. He noticed the boxes. You're moving tomorrow. Why? She laughed quietly. Why does anybody leave a place after 14 years? Claire crouched beside one of the boxes. Were you evicted? Mrs. Alvarez looked at her. Who are you? Claire hesitated. Claire. Ethan watched her choose not to use her last name. Mrs. Alvarez nodded toward the heating vent. They stopped fixing anything. Then they said maintenance costs were too high. Then rent went up. Then came the notices. Did you contact Whitmore? Mrs. Alvarez gave her a look that made Claire's face fall. Honey Whitmore sent the notices. Claire said nothing. Mrs. Alvarez returned to wrapping a plate in newspaper. Ethan led Claire back outside. The rain had stopped. For several seconds, she stood beside the car without opening the door. I signed a policy preventing this. Ethan waited. I thought it was being enforced. That is the problem with thinking. Claire looked at him. That sounded almost cruel. It wasn't meant to be. I know. They drove to a second property, then a third. The pattern repeated. Bad equipment, missing repairs, invoices claiming replacements nobody had seen. At the third building, Ethan found a shipping tag taped to an unopened crate. He peeled it away carefully. Claire. She came over. The label listed a delivery destination, not Whitmore. A warehouse across the city. Owner, Keller Renewal Partners. Claire stared at the name. Ethan noticed. You know it. My chief operating officer is Grant Keller. Ethan looked back at the label. That could be coincidence. Claire's eyes stayed on it. Grant does not believe in coincidence. Back in the car, neither spoke for several minutes. Claire finally said, He worked for my father for 25 years. Ethan looked at her. He was there before I finished college, before I had any authority. He helped build half the systems this company still uses. And he wanted your job. Claire gave him a sharp glance. How do you know that I didn't? You guessed. People do strange things when they think something belongs to them. Claire turned her eyes back to the road. When my father died, Grant expected the board to appoint him CEO. They chose you. My father's voting shares chose me. That bothered him. Claire smiled without humor. He believes he earned what I inherited. The sentence remained between them. At a red light, Ethan's phone rang. Sophie. Claire glanced at the name on the dashboard screen. Ethan answered. Hey, where are you working? You promised. Ethan closed his eyes. I know. You said you would be home. I know. Claire looked away. Sophie's voice became smaller. Mrs. Campbell says I can sleep over here if you're late. I'm coming home. You always say that. Ethan swallowed. I mean it this time. You meant it last time, too. The light turned green. Claire did not move until the car behind them tapped its horn. Ethan ended the call several minutes later. The silence felt different now. Claire said, She worries about you. She shouldn't have to, but she does. Ethan looked at her. You sound like you know something about that. Claire kept her eyes on the road. My father loved the company more easily than he loved people. Ethan waited. He taught me how to read earnings reports when I was 12. That sounds useful. It was. Claire paused. He forgot my school play the same year. Ethan looked out the window. That sounds less useful. Claire smiled faintly. For the first time, the distance between them felt smaller. Not gone, just measurable. The following morning, Rachel gathered them in a conference room. A city map covered one wall. 3 sets of addresses were marked. Properties with unusually high maintenance costs. Properties where employee overtime had disappeared. Properties where tenants had received accelerated payment notices. Rachel pointed to the overlaps. 12 buildings appear on all 3 lists. Ethan stood. He walked closer. Something else caught his attention. The neighborhoods. He knew them. McKees Rocks, Lawrenceville, sections near redevelopment corridors, vacant industrial property being converted, transit projects, new investment. He stared at the map. These places are changing. Claire came beside him. What do you mean, land values? Rachel opened another report. She had already reached the same conclusion. Every building is in an area projected for significant redevelopment. Claire's expression hardened. Ethan looked from one address to another. They're making the buildings look expensive to keep. Rachel nodded. They inflate repair costs. They make the maintenance department look incompetent. Correct. They stop fixing things. Yes. Tenants leave. Rachel said nothing. Claire finished the thought. Then Whitmore sells the properties because they appear to be failing. Rachel placed another document on the table. And a related company buys them below market value. Ethan looked at the shipping label. Keller Renewal Partners. Claire stared at the map. Her phone began ringing. She looked at the screen. Grant Keller. Nobody moved. Claire answered, Grant. His voice was calm enough that Ethan could hear it from where he stood. Claire, I hope I'm not interrupting. What do you need? Nothing at all. I just wanted to make sure you received the notice. Claire's eyes moved toward Rachel. What notice? A notification appeared on Claire's laptop. Emergency board review, chief executive performance and fiduciary conduct, scheduled for 48 hours later. Claire read it once. Then she looked toward the map filled with marked properties. Grant's voice remained pleasant. I thought we should have a conversation about leadership. Claire ended the call. Ethan watched her. He knows. Claire placed the phone on the table. Rachel looked at the board notice. How much Claire's eyes settled on the name Keller Renewal Partners. Enough to be afraid. Claire's words settled over the conference room. For several seconds, nobody moved. Rachel was the first to break the silence. If Grant knows we are looking at the properties, we need to assume Derek knows too. Ethan folded his arms. Then I go back to work. Claire turned toward him. No. He looked at her. No, you are too exposed. I was exposed before you knew my name. That is different. How? Because now there is an active investigation. Ethan shook his head. If I disappear from my schedule right after getting called upstairs, Derek will know exactly why. Claire stood. I can put you on administrative leave. That tells him the same thing. You could be in danger. Ethan looked at the marked properties on the wall. So could Marcus. So could anybody who gave me information. Rachel watched him carefully. Ethan continued. If I walk out now, Derek starts asking who else talked. I stay where I am. I do my job. I keep my head down. Claire's voice sharpened. You are not invincible, Mr. Mercer. I know. Something in the way he said it stopped her. Ethan picked up his jacket. I have a daughter. Believe me, I know. By noon, he was back at Tower 7. Nothing looked different. That bothered him most. The same fluorescent lights hummed over the service corridor. The same maintenance cart sat beside the freight elevator. The same boiler knocked beneath the building. But people watched him now. Marcus gave him a quick nod and kept working. 2 electricians stopped talking when Ethan walked into the room. Derek's office door was open. His chair was empty. Ethan did not ask where he was. At 1:16, Ethan tried to enter a storage room. His badge flashed red. He tried again. Denied. Marcus looked over. That's new. Ethan stepped back. What else changed? Marcus lowered his voice. Tool cage needs supervisor approval now. Mechanical logs are restricted. Derek told everybody there was a security review. Since when? Since this morning. Ethan nodded slowly. Grant was closing doors, one at a time. At 2:40, Derek finally appeared. He stood at the end of the corridor and watched Ethan for several seconds before approaching. Busy morning, Ethan kept tightening a fitting. Always. Heard headquarters is asking questions. Headquarters is always asking questions. Derek leaned against the wall. You know what your problem is? Ethan did not look up. I'm sure you'll tell me. You think being right makes you safe. Ethan stopped working. Derek smiled. Men like us do not get protected because we are right. Men like us. You think I grew up in a boardroom? Ethan looked at him now. Derek's smile disappeared. I had bills too, kids too. I learned something you haven't. What? When somebody bigger than you tells you where the line is, you stop pretending the line is optional. Ethan picked up his wrench. That how you sleep? Derek's eyes hardened. You should worry less about how I sleep and more about where your daughter sleeps next month. Ethan stood. For one dangerous second, the space between them became very small. Derek did not move. Neither did Ethan. Then Marcus called from down the hall. Ethan, I need you. Ethan stepped away. Derek watched him go. That afternoon, Grant Keller sent a calendar invitation. Private meeting, 4:30 p.m., executive offices. Ethan stared at the screen. He called Rachel first. Grant wants to see me. There was silence on the line. Alone. That is what the invitation says. Do not record him. Ethan frowned. Why not? Pennsylvania law is not something I want you improvising with. Then what do I do? Listen. Claire came onto the line. If you are uncomfortable, decline. Ethan almost laughed. He already knows where my kid lives. Claire went quiet. Ethan continued. I'm going. Grant's office was warmer than Claire's. Not physically. Everything about it was designed to make people relax. Soft lamps, dark wood, framed photographs. A picture of Grant beside Claire's father at a groundbreaking ceremony. Another of Grant shaking hands with the governor. Family photographs filled the credenza. A wife, 2 grown sons, a lake house. Grant stood when Ethan entered. "Mr. Mercer, Mr. Keller, please, Ethan." He gestured toward a chair. Coffee waited on the table. Ethan did not touch it. Grant sat opposite him. "You have had a difficult few months." Ethan said nothing. Grant smiled. "I understand pride, probably more than you think. I grew up outside Erie. My father repaired furnaces. My mother cleaned offices at night." Ethan looked around the room. "You came a long way." "I did." Grant leaned back. "And that is why I hate watching talented men get used by people born into positions they did not earn." Ethan knew exactly who he meant. Grant continued. "Claire Whitmore is intelligent, but intelligence and judgment are not the same thing. You called me here to talk about the CEO. I called you here because I know what pressure looks like." Grant slid a folder across the table. Inside was a job offer, regional facilities manager. The salary was almost twice what Ethan made. Then Ethan saw the signing bonus. He stared at the number. Grant noticed. That would solve a few problems. Ethan closed the folder. "What do you want?" Grant's expression stayed pleasant. Nothing unreasonable. He placed another page on top. A prepared statement. Ethan read the first paragraph. It claimed Claire had pressured him to exaggerate maintenance discrepancies. The second paragraph accused Rachel of coaching him. The third said Ethan had provided altered records in exchange for financial assistance. Ethan looked up. "You want me to lie?" Grant folded his hands. "I want you to correct the record. There is nothing to correct." Grant's eyes remained calm. "Your rent is overdue." Ethan froze. Grant continued. "Your daughter's school account is behind." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Your truck payment cleared 2 days ago. Barely." The room seemed to shrink. Grant leaned forward. "You are a good father, Ethan. Good fathers make practical choices." Ethan looked down at the paper. Every part of him wanted to tear it in half. Instead, he let his shoulders drop. He made himself look tired. Because he was tired. He let Grant see fear. Because the fear was real. "How long do I have?" Grant smiled. "Until tomorrow." Ethan picked up the folder. "I need to think." "Of course." Grant stood. As Ethan reached the door, Grant spoke again. "One more thing." Ethan turned. "People at your income level tend to confuse pride with integrity." Ethan looked at him. Grant smiled. "They are not the same." Ethan left without answering. Rachel and Claire were waiting in a small conference room 2 floors below. Ethan put the folder on the table. Rachel opened it. Claire looked at the salary offer, then at Ethan. "You could have taken this." He frowned. "That surprises you. It would solve your rent problem. It would solve a lot of problems. Then why didn't you?" Ethan looked at the statement Grant wanted him to sign. "Because Sophie eats what I bring home." Claire waited. "And if I bring home money I got by selling the truth, then every meal she eats comes from that choice." Claire said nothing. Ethan looked at her. "I can be broke and still look my daughter in the eye." Rachel closed the folder. "Keep the documents." Ethan looked at her. "Why?" Because Grant was arrogant enough to put part of the offer in writing. For the first time that day, Ethan almost smiled. Rachel spent the night tracing Allegheny Technical Services. One company owned another. That company belonged to a holding group. The holding group fed into a trust. By 3:12 in the morning, Rachel found a transfer connecting the trust to Keller Renewal Partners. Not Grant directly, but close. Very close. She called Claire. Then Ethan. At 6:05 the next morning, they gathered in Rachel's office. She placed the payment chain on the screen. Claire stared at it. "This is enough to justify the audit." Rachel nodded, but not enough to prove Grant personally directed it. "What do you need?" "The Central Payment Archive." Ethan looked at the screen. "How far back?" 6 months should give us the pattern." Rachel logged into the protected server. Nothing appeared. She frowned. Tried again. Empty. Claire stepped closer. "What happened?" Rachel checked the audit trail. Her face changed. The archive was purged at 2:47 this morning. By who? Emergency Administrator credentials. Claire went still. Only a handful of executives had that level of access. Ethan stared at the blank screen. "So they know exactly what we were looking for." Rachel nodded. "And they got there first." By noon, Grant stopped attacking the evidence. He attacked the story. An article appeared on a regional financial website. The headline did not accuse Claire of misconduct directly. It did not need to. It described an unnamed CEO who had allegedly intervened in payroll and housing matters after receiving a personal late-night message from a financially distressed male employee. No names in the first paragraph. By the third, there were enough details to identify everyone. Claire read it in silence. Rachel stood beside her. This came from internal records. Claire looked at the screenshot of Ethan's message. How did they get this company phone backup? Claire's face hardened. At Tower 7, Ethan learned about the article before he saw it. Marcus approached him near the loading dock. You need to check your phone. Ethan did. The story was already moving through employee group chats. One message read, "Guess we know how to get overtime approved now." Another, "Just text Claire after midnight." Ethan locked the phone. Marcus looked furious. "They're making it sound like you slept your way into an audit." Ethan stared at him. Marcus winced. Bad wording. You think I'm angry? So am I. At 1:30, Derek called Ethan into his office. Human Resources was on speakerphone. The language was formal. Unauthorized possession of proprietary company records, potential breach of confidential information, immediate termination pending review. Ethan listened without interrupting. When HR finished, Derek slid a box across the desk. For your personal things. Ethan looked at him. You knew. Derek's face stayed blank. About what, the article? I read it. No, you knew it was coming. Derek leaned back. You always thought being honest made you smarter than everybody else. Ethan stood. No. He picked up the box. I thought it made me able to sleep at night. His badge stopped working before he reached the parking garage. He drove home in silence. Millstone Gardens looked exactly the same, but a new notice was taped to his apartment door. 48 hours to vacate. Linda Foster stood at the end of the hallway when Ethan pulled it down. I'm sorry. He turned. You said the extension was approved. It was. What changed? She looked miserable. Regional management called. Who I don't know. You do know. Linda lowered her voice. They said the protection did not apply because you are no longer an employee. Ethan laughed once. The sound scared her. They fired me at 1:30. Linda looked away. They called before 2. Ethan folded the notice. Fast company. That evening, Claire arrived outside Millstone Gardens. Ethan met her in the parking lot. He did not invite her upstairs. Claire spoke first. I can challenge the termination. How long, I don't know. The eviction, Rachel is reviewing it. How long? Claire hesitated. Ethan nodded. Right. I'm trying to help. He looked at her. You go home tonight. Claire said nothing. You sleep in your own bed. Yes. My daughter is upstairs packing her books into grocery boxes. Ethan, you said you wanted to know what happens downstairs. His voice stayed low. That is what happens. Claire absorbed the words. You get enough money and lawyers between yourself and the ground and everything becomes a process. That is not fair. No. He looked toward the apartment building. None of this is. Claire stepped closer. I underestimated Grant. Ethan laughed bitterly. That is expensive for me, I know. No. He looked directly at her. You know the sentence. I am living it. Claire did not defend herself. That mattered. She reached into her bag and handed him a document. What is this formal confirmation of unpaid wages? He looked at her. It is signed by the company and internal audit. Even if I lose control tomorrow, you can use it in court. Ethan read the first page. This does not stop the eviction. No. Does not give me my job back. No. Does not fix any of this tonight. No. He folded the document. Claire's voice softened. It is the one thing I can give you that does not require you to trust me. Ethan looked at her. For a moment, the anger in his face loosened. Not forgiveness, just exhaustion. Thank you. Claire nodded, then left. Upstairs, Sophie was sitting on the living room floor between 3 cardboard boxes. She had packed her books, her stuffed rabbit, 2 framed photographs. Ethan stopped in the doorway. Sophie looked at him. Are we moving? He took off his coat. We might have to. Why, he sat beside her. She picked at a piece of tape. Did you do something bad? No. Did you lie? No. Did you steal? No. She looked at him. Then why are we packing like we have to run? Ethan did not know how to answer. Sophie picked up one of her books. If you did not do anything wrong, maybe we should not leave like you did. She carried the book into her bedroom. Ethan remained on the floor. Hours later, after Sophie fell asleep, he sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, invoices, payroll statements, maintenance copies, the eviction notice. He read them again because sleep was impossible. Then he saw it. A small error, a regional code printed near the bottom of one contractor invoice. Penwest had been typed Penwset. Ethan frowned. He checked another invoice. Same mistake. Then another. Same. His eyes moved to the eviction notice. Near the bottom. Penwset. He sat up slowly. Same typo, different departments, different documents, same source. The contractor invoices and eviction notices were being generated through linked administrative templates. Housing pressure was not separate from the maintenance fraud. It was a part of the same system. Ethan stood and began pacing. Then another thought came. The central servers could be wiped. But the buildings did not depend entirely on central servers. During network outages, every building controller saved local command history, storm redundancy, offline logs, old technology nobody cared about until the internet failed. Ethan called Rachel. She answered on the fourth ring. Do you know what time it is? Yes, then this better be good. Grant erased headquarters. Yes, he did not erase the buildings. Silence. What do you mean the controllers keep local records? Rachel sat up on the other end. How long depends on the model? 6 months, sometimes a year. Can you access them? Not anymore. You were fired. I know. Rachel was quiet. Then Ethan said, but you were not. The next morning, Rachel entered Millstone Gardens with a legal authorization order and an IT specialist. Ethan stood outside the mechanical room. He never touched the controller. Rachel did. The old system took almost 3 minutes to load. Then lines of archived data appeared. Command dates, user accounts, revision history. Derek Shaw had altered hundreds of tickets. Rachel scrolled, then stopped. Another administrator ID appeared repeatedly. She opened the device registration. Claire, standing behind her, leaned closer. The originating device was registered to the executive floor, Grant Keller's office. No one spoke. Rachel exported the logs and sealed the system. By afternoon, Ethan's story had reached the entire company. He stopped trying to hide from it. He wrote one paragraph and sent it to Marcus. Marcus forwarded it. Then another employee did. Then another. Ethan admitted the message was real. He admitted he had $46. He admitted he was behind on rent. He wrote that there was no shame in struggling after working hours a company refused to pay. He ended with one sentence. Being short on money is not the same thing as being short on integrity. The replies changed. A janitor sent Rachel 3 missing pay stubs. An electrician sent overtime records. A leasing coordinator forwarded copies of suspicious eviction instructions. A payroll clerk contacted Rachel privately, Carla Nguyen. She had saved screenshots. By evening, Ethan was no longer a single employee with a complaint. There were dozens. Then, Grant made a mistake. At an internal briefing trying to prove Claire and Ethan had conspired from the beginning, he displayed Ethan's original rent message on a large screen. Date, time, 11:48 p.m. Rachel stared at it, then checked Ethan's visitor records. His first meeting with Claire had occurred the following morning at 700. She placed the 2 timestamps side by side. The accusation Grant had built depended on a relationship that did not exist when the message was sent. Claire read the comparison in silence. Then her phone vibrated. Board vote. 9:00 a.m. Rachel looked across the conference table. We can prove the tickets were altered. Claire nodded. We can prove the contractor fraud. Yes. The housing pressure. Yes. Ethan stood near the window. But you still cannot prove Grant controlled every part of it. Rachel looked at him. Not yet. Ethan stared down at the scattered documents. Then he remembered Grant's office, the coffee, the family photographs, the employment offer, and a piece of paper lying beneath Grant's hand that afternoon. A project number printed across the top. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He had seen that number before. Ethan stared at the scattered documents. Then he remembered Grant's office, the coffee, the family photographs, the employment offer, and a piece of paper lying beneath Grant's hand that afternoon. A project number printed across the top. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He had seen that number before. Rachel. She looked up. Give me the property list again. Rachel turned her laptop toward him. 12 buildings filled the screen. Ethan scanned the addresses. His finger stopped at a warehouse property near the river. That one. What about it? I worked there last spring. Rachel waited. There was an old control unit in the east mechanical room. The asset tag had a project number attached to it. Claire stepped closer. You remember the number I remember numbers attached to equipment? Rachel gave him a skeptical look. From months ago, Ethan looked at her. I remember the serial number on the boiler in my apartment building. That is not normal. I never said I was normal. He closed his eyes. The number came back slowly. 7419388. Then the final 2 digits. 74193822. Rachel typed it. Nothing appeared in Whitmore's internal database. She checked municipal property records, then county filings. A result appeared. One transfer authorization, then another. Rachel opened the first. Claire leaned over her shoulder. The project code was attached to a package of 12 properties scheduled for disposition. Ethan looked at the sale prices. They are cheap, below appraisal, Rachel said. How far below? Some by 20%, some more. Claire's face tightened. Who are the buyers? Rachel opened the ownership records. The first company led to another corporation. That corporation led to a trust. The trust had one listed controlling beneficiary. Rachel stopped typing. Claire read the name. Rebecca Keller. Ethan looked at her. Grant's wife, Claire, shook her head. His sister. Nobody spoke. Rachel opened the remaining property records. The same trust appeared again and again. Different company names. Different mailing addresses. Same beneficiary. Rachel leaned back. There it is. Claire looked at the screen. The properties lose money on paper. Rachel nodded. Maintenance costs rise. Tenants are pushed out. Yes. Whitmore sells. Yes. And his family buys. Rachel looked at Ethan. Then they wait for redevelopment. Ethan stared at the map on the wall. The scheme was no longer a suspicion. It had a beginning, a method, and a destination. Claire turned toward the window. For the first time since Ethan had met her, she looked afraid. Not of Grant, of what exposing him would do. At 8 that evening, Claire's communications advisors crowded into the conference room. 3 attorneys joined by video. Rachel sat at one end of the table. Ethan stood near the wall. The senior advisor, Thomas Bell, spoke carefully. We have enough to remove Keller internally. Claire looked at him. Remove him how? Private resignation. Immediate separation agreement. Independent review afterward. Rachel's expression hardened. Separation agreement? Thomas nodded. We avoid making allegations publicly until outside counsel completes its review. Ethan listened. Another advisor spoke. If this becomes public tomorrow, lenders may react. Investors will react. 12 property transactions could freeze. Projects across Pennsylvania may be affected. Claire looked down at the documents. Thomas continued. You can protect the company and still remove the problem. Ethan finally spoke. What happens to the people already removed from those buildings? The room went quiet. Thomas looked at him. I am sorry, the tenants. This meeting concerns corporate exposure. That is what I asked. Thomas shifted in his chair. Those matters can be reviewed separately. Ethan looked at Claire. And the workers? No answer. The people whose pay disappeared. Thomas exhaled. Mr. Mercer, nobody is suggesting they will be ignored. You are suggesting Grant gets to resign quietly. This is more complicated than that. No. Ethan's voice remained calm. It is more expensive than that. That is not the same thing. Claire looked at him. Ethan continued. If he walks away privately, everybody with money gets protected first. Thomas frowned. That is an unfair characterization. Mrs. Alvarez packed 14 years of her life into boxes because your company told her she had to leave. Claire lowered her eyes. Ethan did not. She does not have a communications advisor. Nobody interrupted him now. Marcus did not get paid for hours he worked. Carla was afraid to speak in payroll. Sophie packed her books because somebody decided my apartment was leverage. He looked directly at Claire. You can protect the name on the building. His voice softened. Or you can protect what that name is supposed to mean. Thomas began to respond. Claire lifted one hand. The room fell silent. She looked at the evidence again, then at Rachel. Prepare the complete disclosure package. Thomas stared at her. Claire, all of it. You need to understand the risk. I do. The stock could fall. I know. The board could still remove you. I know. Then why would you do this before the vote? Claire looked toward the city beyond the glass. Because if I wait until I know whether I still have the job, then this is about saving my job. Thomas said nothing. Claire turned back. It is not. The advisors left after 10. Rachel stayed. Ethan gathered his coat. Claire remained seated. You do not have to appear tomorrow, she said. Ethan looked at her. Yes, I do. Grant will attack you personally. He already has. He will use your finances. He already did. He will talk about Sophie. That stopped him. Claire noticed. If he does, she said, Rachel can stop the questioning. Ethan shook his head. No, you do not owe this company anything. I am not doing it for the company. Claire watched him. Ethan buttoned his coat. I am doing it because men like Grant count on people like me being too embarrassed to stand in a room like that. He left. The parking garage was nearly empty. Ethan had almost reached his truck when a voice carried across the concrete. You really should learn when you have won enough. Grant Keller stood beside a black sedan. No smile this time. No coffee. No warm office. Ethan stopped. Grant walked toward him carrying an envelope. You are making this harder than it needs to be. For who? For everyone. Grant held out the envelope. Ethan did not take it. What is that A solution? Ethan laughed quietly. You have a lot of those. Grant placed the envelope on the hood of Ethan's truck. Inside was a check. Ethan looked at the amount. For several seconds he said nothing. It could pay his rent for years. It could replace the truck. It could cover Sophie's school expenses. It could put money away for college. Grant watched his face. Your job is restored tomorrow. Ethan kept staring at the check. Senior management track. Full benefits, housing assistance. Ethan looked up. Grant continued. And a separate education fund for your daughter. Ethan's expression changed. Grant saw it. That matters. Do not talk about her. I am offering to protect her. No. Grant's voice remained smooth. You are protecting your pride. Ethan picked up the check. Grant smiled. Everybody has a number. Ethan read the amount again. Then he placed the check back on the hood. Maybe. Grant's smile faded. But you keep confusing what I need with what I am worth. Grant stared at him. Ethan opened his truck door. You will regret this. Ethan paused. Probably. He got inside. Grant left the check where it was. Ethan did not touch it again. Rachel did. At 7:30 the next morning, she photographed it where Grant had left it, collected it with a witness, and added it to the evidence file. At 8:57, Ethan stood outside the Whitmore boardroom. His hands felt cold. He had faced electrical fires with steadier nerves. Rachel noticed. You can still leave. Ethan looked through the glass doors. Grant sat at the far end of the table. Claire sat opposite him. Directors filled the room between them. No, Rachel opened the door. Grant spoke first. He spoke well. That was the dangerous part. He did not sound angry. He sounded reasonable. He described Claire as a leader under pressure, a woman who had allowed sympathy for a struggling employee to interfere with corporate judgment. Then Ethan's message appeared on the screen. Can I pay the rent next Friday instead? Grant turned toward the board. This is the communication that began an unauthorized internal campaign involving confidential records, corporate resources, and special treatment. Several directors looked toward Ethan. Grant continued. Mr. Mercer had financial motives. Ms. Whitmore had personal motives. Claire's expression did not change. Grant looked directly at Ethan. Do you deny sending that message? Ethan stood. No. The room shifted. Grant seemed almost pleased. Ethan walked toward the screen. I sent it at 11:48 at night. He looked at the words. I had $46.17 in my account. A director glanced down. Ethan kept going. My rent was overdue. My overtime had not been paid. My daughter was asleep down the hall. He turned toward the board. I meant to send it to my property manager. Grant leaned back. Ethan looked at him. I had never met Claire Whitmore. Rachel placed another image on the screen. Visitor records, security footage, meeting schedule. Ethan's first direct meeting with Claire occurred the following morning. 7 Suro A. p.m. Rachel spoke. The message, Mr. Keller has presented as evidence of a pre-existing arrangement was sent more than 7 hours before Mr. Mercer and Ms. Whitmore ever met. Grant interrupted. That proves nothing. Rachel looked at him. It proves the relationship you described did not exist when the alleged conspiracy began. The first crack appeared. Rachel continued. Payroll records filled the screen. Overtime marked paid. Bank records showing no deposit. Dozens of employees. Then contractor invoices. Allegheny Technical Services. Payments for labor actually performed by Whitmore employees. Equipment billed as new that had never been installed. Photographs appeared. Rusting boilers. Old serial plates. Original maintenance reports beside altered versions. Rachel spoke without raising her voice. Those records were modified after technicians submitted them. Grant looked toward Derek. Derek sat against the wall with company counsel. Rachel displayed user histories. Derek Shaw, hundreds of modifications. Derek suddenly stood. I did it. Claire turned. Rachel stopped. Derek swallowed. I changed the tickets. Grant did not look at him. Derek continued. It was my decision. Operations targets were impossible. I adjusted records to keep the region within budget. One director looked toward Grant, so Keller was not involved. Derek shook his head. No. Grant finally looked at him. There was relief in his eyes. Rachel clicked once. A new screen appeared. Controller logs. Derek's face changed. Rachel pointed to the command history. These records were recovered from local building controllers. Grant spoke. Stolen data. Rachel looked at him. No. Her voice was flat. Whitmore property secured under internal audit authority. She displayed the verification codes. No files were altered after creation. Then she highlighted a sequence. Derek's administrator account changed a maintenance ticket. 3 minutes earlier, a remote authorization command had arrived. Originating device. Executive Office 4103. Grant Keller. Derek stared at the screen. Grant's attorney leaned toward him. Rachel showed another, then another, then another. Derek looked at Grant. His face drained. You said nobody checked the local controllers. The room became completely silent. Grant turned toward him. Do not speak. Too late. Rachel moved to the property sales. 12 buildings, below market values, shell companies, Keller Renewal Partners, the family trust, Rebecca Keller, Grant's sister. Grant finally stood. You are describing restructuring. Ethan watched him. Grant turned toward the directors. These properties were liabilities. Aging buildings in declining condition. High maintenance costs. Weak occupancy. Claire spoke for the first time. Conditions your operation helped create. Grant looked at her. I created value where you created sentiment. Claire remained seated. By forcing tenants out by removing liabilities. The words landed differently than Grant intended. Claire slowly stood. You mean people. Grant looked around the room. I mean assets. Nobody moved. Rachel placed one final image on the screen. The check. Grant's face changed. Ethan's job offer appeared beside it. Rachel read the authorization line, issued through Grant Keller's office. Claire looked at Grant. You have spent 2 weeks telling this board Ethan Mercer invented evidence because he wanted money. Grant said nothing. Claire pointed toward the check. Why were you offering him money to disappear? Grant's attorney whispered something. Grant ignored him. He looked at Ethan. You kept it. Ethan shook his head. You left it. Grant's control finally broke. This company employs thousands of people. His voice rose. You think businesses this size survive because every decision feels fair? Claire stared at him. No. Grant pointed toward the city. They survive because somebody makes decisions other people are too weak to make. You stole from employees. I controlled costs. You falsified maintenance records. I protected valuations. You pushed families from their homes. Grant's jaw tightened. Those properties were worth more empty. The room went still again. Claire looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned to the board. The full evidence package has been prepared for state and federal investigators. Several directors shifted. Grant stared at her. You would destroy your own company. No. Claire's voice was calm. I am refusing to destroy it quietly. One director spoke. You already contacted regulators, Rachel answered. Notification letters are prepared for immediate submission. Grant looked around the room. Men who had supported him for years stopped meeting his eyes. The calculation had changed. Protecting Grant no longer meant avoiding scandal. It meant attaching themselves to evidence that could leave the building within minutes. A director near the center of the table spoke. "I move that Grant Keller be suspended immediately pending independent investigation." Another voice, second. The vote happened quickly, not unanimously, but decisively. Grant remained standing. Nobody looked at him. Security entered quietly. As Grant walked toward the door, he stopped near Ethan. The two men looked at each other. Grant had no offer left, no position, no threat. Ethan said nothing. Grant walked out. The motion to remove Claire failed less than 20 minutes later. When the room finally emptied, Claire remained near the window. Rachel gathered the files. Ethan stood by the table. The adrenaline was fading now. His hands had started to shake. Claire noticed. "You all right, I think so." She nodded toward a chair. "Sit down before you find out." Ethan sat. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Claire asked quietly, "What do you want?" Ethan looked at her. "For what?" "For everything this cost you." He glanced toward the stacks of employee claims Rachel had collected. Marcus, Carla, the electricians, the janitors, families he had never met. Then he thought of Sophie's boxes still sitting on the living room floor. "Pay them." Claire's expression softened. "Ethan, every hour." He looked at the claims. Every person. And after that, he leaned back in the chair. "After that, you can ask me again." Claire looked at him for a long moment. Then she gave the smallest smile. "That is what I thought you would say." Claire's voice was quiet. Not surprised, not amused, just certain. Ethan looked at the stacks of claims spread across the boardroom table. Names, hours, amounts, people who had spent months wondering whether they had made some mistake in their own calculations. People who had been told the system was right and their bank accounts were wrong. People who had learned to lower their voices when asking for money they had already earned. Rachel closed the final folder. "I will start with payroll." Ethan looked at her. "All of them. All verified claims, no quiet settlements." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "You really do not trust lawyers." "I trust receipts." Claire almost smiled. Rachel gathered the files. "Then you are going to enjoy the next several weeks." She left the room. Ethan remained seated. The boardroom looked larger now that everyone else was gone. Grant's chair sat empty at the far end. The screen still displayed the final vote. Claire walked toward the window. Below them, Pittsburgh moved through another ordinary morning. Cars crossed the bridges. Buses stopped. People walked into buildings without knowing what had happened 41 floors above the street. Ethan looked down at his hands. They were still shaking slightly. Claire noticed. "You held it together in there. I had practice. With board meetings, with pretending I am not terrified." She turned toward him. "That is not the same thing." "Close enough." Claire looked at the empty chair where Grant had sat. "For years I thought fear looked like weakness." Ethan stood. "What does it look like now?" She considered the question. "Information." He looked at her. She continued. "It tells you what you care enough to lose." For once, Ethan had no quick answer. Claire looked toward him. "You should go home. My apartment may not be mine much longer." "It is." He frowned. Claire walked back to the table. Rachel filed an emergency suspension of the eviction order before the board meeting. Ethan stared at her. "You did not tell me." "She did not tell me until this morning." "Why? Because she knew you would ask whether the other tenants were protected too." Ethan blinked. Claire gave him a tired smile. "She is learning you. For the first time in 2 days." Something inside Ethan loosened. Not completely, but enough to breathe. He picked up his coat. At the door, Claire called his name. He turned. She looked as though there was something else she wanted to say, something personal, something that did not belong in the same room as legal files and fraud reports. In the end, she only said, "Go see Sophie." Ethan nodded. "I will." The drive back to Millstone Gardens took 27 minutes. Ethan remembered almost none of it. He pulled into the cracked parking lot and sat behind the wheel for a moment. The eviction notice was still folded inside his jacket pocket. He touched it. then looked toward the second-floor window. Home. At least for today. When he opened the apartment door, Sophie was sitting on the floor beside the boxes. Mrs. Campbell sat on the couch holding a cup of coffee. Sophie jumped up. "Dad." Ethan barely had time to set down his keys before she ran into him. He wrapped both arms around her. She held on hard. Too hard for a child who was supposed to believe everything was fine. Ethan closed his eyes. Mrs. Campbell stood. "I will give you 2 a minute." She picked up her purse. At the door, she looked at Ethan. Whatever happened, she did not sleep much. Neither did I, he thought. But he only said thank you. Mrs. Campbell left. Sophie stepped back. "Are we moving?" Ethan looked at the boxes. "Not today." Her face changed. "Not today" means maybe later. He crouched in front of her. "No." He reached into his jacket and removed the eviction notice. Then he tore it in half. Not dramatically, just enough to make the point. "We are staying." Sophie stared at the torn paper. For real. For real. She threw her arms around him again. Ethan laughed into her hair. "Careful. You are crying. I am not. You are. Dust. There is no dust. Very aggressive dust." She pulled back and wiped his cheek with her sleeve. "Did you win?" Ethan looked at her. The question was simple. The answer was not. "I told the truth. That is not what I asked." He smiled. "Then yes." Sophie nodded as if this was the only answer she had expected. Then she looked at the boxes. "Do I have to unpack yes? All of it yes? That feels unfair. Life is difficult. You say that whenever you do not want to help. I will help." She smiled. "Good." For the rest of the afternoon, father and daughter unpacked the apartment they had never actually left. Books returned to shelves. Photographs went back onto the wall. Sophie placed her stuffed rabbit on the bed. Ethan returned her drawing to the refrigerator. Our place. He smoothed the corner beneath the magnet. That evening, the first news reports appeared. Grant Keller had been suspended from Whitmore Property and Infrastructure Group pending an internal and external investigation. The company had notified state authorities and federal financial investigators. Claire Whitmore had survived the board vote. No details about Ethan were included at first. He was grateful. Sophie was eating cereal at the kitchen table when his phone began vibrating. Marcus. Then Carla. Then a number Ethan did not recognize. Then another. He answered Marcus first. "You alive?" Ethan looked at Sophie. "Apparently." Marcus laughed. "Derek is gone. Suspended. Same thing to everybody who had to work for him." Ethan leaned against the counter. "How are people taking it depends." "On what?" "Some are angry. Some are scared. Some think payroll might actually have to pay us now." Ethan smiled. Marcus's voice softened. "You really stood in front of the board, yeah? With Grant Keller?" "Yeah." "You insult him, no. Disappointing." Ethan laughed. Marcus continued. "Listen, man, what thank you?" Ethan's smile faded. "You sent your records too, because you went first." Ethan looked toward Sophie. She was pretending not to listen. "Get your money," Ethan said. "I plan to." The first repayments began 11 days later. Whitmore did not send one large announcement. The money appeared in individual accounts. Corrected overtime, interest, additional payments where employment law required compensation. Marcus called Ethan at 6:03 in the morning. "I got it." Ethan was making pancakes. "How much I am not telling you. Then why did you call?" "Because I got it." Ethan smiled. On the other end, Marcus's voice cracked. "My wife thought I had been lying about the hours." Ethan stopped flipping the pancake. Marcus laughed awkwardly. "Not lying. You know what I mean." "She thought maybe I had calculated wrong." "Yeah, I started thinking that too." Ethan leaned against the stove. That is how they kept it going. Marcus was quiet. Then he said not anymore. The call ended. Ethan looked at his own phone. His payment had not arrived yet. For the first time, he was not worried about being last. 3 days later, Carla received hers. Then 2 electricians. Then dozens more. The claims widened beyond maintenance. Janitors, security staff, leasing employees, people who had been told the missing hours were software problems. People who had quietly stopped asking. Rachel's office became the busiest part of the company. She hated almost every minute of it. Ethan knew because she called him to complain. They sent me 74 claims yesterday. You sound happy. I am considering resignation. You would hate retirement. I would enjoy silence. You would last 3 days. Rachel paused. Claire says you are difficult. Claire says a lot of things. I said you were difficult before she did. That means you are a visionary. Rachel hung up on him. 2 weeks after the board meeting, Ethan's own wages arrived. He was at the kitchen table, same chair, same scratched surface, same cracked window. Sophie was doing multiplication homework across from him. His phone vibrated. Deposit notification. Ethan opened the banking app. For several seconds, he simply stared. The missing overtime, all of it. He checked the amount twice, then a third time. Sophie looked up. What, nothing? That is your money face, my what? You have a face when you are worried about money. I do not, you do. What does it look like? She squeezed her eyebrows together and stared at the table as if it had personally offended her. Ethan laughed. That is not accurate. It is very accurate. He turned the phone toward her. She read the balance. Her eyes widened. Are we rich? No. She looked disappointed. Not even a little. Not even remotely. Then why are you smiling? Ethan opened the tenant payment portal. The outstanding rent appeared on screen. He entered the amount, paused, then pressed submit. Payment accepted. Balance 0. He turned the laptop toward Sophie. We are paid. She looked at the screen, then at him, like really paid really. No notices, no. No boxes, no. She stood on the chair and wrapped both arms around his neck. Ethan held her. He thought about the night he had sat at the same table with $46.17. He had imagined relief, feeling larger, louder. Instead, it felt like this, his daughter's arms around his neck, a 0 on a screen, a quiet kitchen. Enough. Across Whitmore's residential properties, other notices were being reversed, too. Rachel's audit found that dozens of tenants had received improper payment demands tied to the same regional management system. Some had already moved. Those cases were transferred to outside counsel for compensation review. Others had been days away. Their notices were canceled. At Millstone Gardens, Ethan saw Mrs. Alvarez carrying dishes back into her apartment. He stopped in the hallway. I thought your son moved you. He tried. She placed a bowl inside a cabinet. I told him I was coming back. Ethan smiled. Good. She pointed toward a box. You want to help instead of standing there, apparently. He lifted the box. Mrs. Alvarez watched him. You caused all this trouble. That depends who you ask. I heard you made executives nervous. That part might be true. Good. She pointed toward the kitchen. Put that there. As Ethan carried the box, the front door opened. Claire stepped inside. No assistant, no company photographer, no regional manager, jeans, dark coat, same boots she had worn during the inspection. Mrs. Alvarez looked at her, then looked again. Recognition slowly appeared. You. Claire nodded. Me. Mrs. Alvarez folded her arms. You are the Whitmore woman. Yes. You said your name was Claire. It is. You forgot the important part. Claire accepted the criticism. I did. Mrs. Alvarez pointed toward the boxes. They canceled my notice. I know. They say they owe me money. They probably do. Mrs. Alvarez studied her. You going to pay it? Yes. Without making me sign something saying nobody did anything wrong? Claire almost smiled. Yes. Mrs. Alvarez nodded. All right. She picked up another plate. Then you can help him. Claire looked at Ethan. Ethan pointed toward the box. You heard her. Claire removed her coat. For 10 minutes, the chief executive of Whitmore Property and Infrastructure Group helped an elderly tenant unpack dishes. Nobody took a photograph. Nobody released a statement. Ethan noticed Claire seemed happier without an audience. When they finished, Mrs. Alvarez looked at the two of them standing side by side. You married Ethan nearly dropped a stack of newspapers. Claire blinked. No. Mrs. Alvarez looked at Ethan. You know. Mrs. Alvarez shrugged. Interesting. Ethan cleared his throat. We should probably check the boiler. Mrs. Alvarez smiled to herself. Yes, you probably should. They left quickly. In the hallway, Claire looked straight ahead. Ethan tried not to laugh. You are enjoying this? No, you are. Maybe slightly. She stopped near the stairwell. How is Sophie better? School good? Field trip. Ethan stared at her. How do you know about that? You mentioned the fee. I mentioned it once. Claire raised an eyebrow. I have a good memory. Ethan recognized Derek's old line and laughed despite himself. Claire smiled too. It was different now. Not the restrained, almost smile from the early days. A real one, Ethan noticed, then looked away before the moment could become something else. Claire noticed that too. Neither mentioned it. The investigation continued. Grant's suspension became permanent. State investigators opened a formal fraud inquiry. Federal financial investigators requested the property transfer files. Keller Renewal Partners was frozen from purchasing additional Whitmore assets. The trust connected to Grant's sister came under scrutiny. Derek remained suspended for several weeks before agreeing to cooperate. He gave investigators emails, meeting records, instructions, evidence showing Grant had built the system gradually, not all at once, one compromise at a time. Alter one ticket, move one expense, pressure one employee, make one building look worse than it was, then another, then another. Derek's cooperation did not erase what he had done. Ethan never pretended it did. But when Rachel told him Derek had 2 children and had been under pressure from Grant for years, Ethan found himself remembering their conversation in the corridor. Men like us do not get protected because we are right. Ethan understood the fear. He did not forgive the choices. There was a difference. Claire made changes quickly, not dramatic ones, practical ones. The board approved an independent ethics monitor. Payroll discrepancies could now be reported outside regional management. Housing protection orders were automatically copied to internal audit. Maintenance tickets involving safety systems could no longer be altered without preserving the original version permanently. Claire also created something nobody on the board had requested. Once every month, 1 full day disappeared from her executive calendar. No board meetings, no investor calls, no presentations. She visited properties, unannounced. The first month, executives complained. The second month, regional managers began preparing for possible visits. By the third, Claire deliberately stopped telling anyone which city she planned to enter. She walked boiler rooms, laundry facilities, parking structures, leasing offices. She spoke to janitors and security guards without supervisors standing beside them. At one building, a cleaner told her management had been buying cheaper chemicals that caused employees headaches. Claire ordered a review. At another, a technician showed her a generator test schedule that looked perfect on paper but had been skipped twice. The system changed slowly, because real systems always did. Ethan returned to work too, but not to Derek's department. Rachel called him into her office one Tuesday morning. A single folder waited on the table. Ethan looked at it. "No," Rachel frowned. "You have not opened it. The last time an executive handed me a folder with a job offer, I nearly ended up homeless. I am not an executive. You are wearing a suit. I am regretting this conversation already." Ethan sat. Rachel pushed the folder toward him. Whitmore had created a field integrity and verification team. Its purpose was simple. Compare what headquarters was told with what physically existed. Independent site inspections, worker interviews, equipment verification, payroll spot checks where maintenance records and labor records conflicted. Ethan read the title. Senior Field Verification Specialist, probationary appointment, 6 months. He looked at Rachel. "Who do I report to me? Not Claire Good." Rachel stared at him. "You could at least pretend to be disappointed. I like sleeping. You think Claire interferes? No. Then why does it matter?" Ethan closed the folder. "Because I do not want anyone saying I got the job because she likes me." Rachel watched him. "Does she?" Ethan looked up. Rachel's expression remained perfectly serious. He narrowed his eyes. "You really are a lawyer. Answer the question. I am leaving. You have not signed the offer." Ethan picked up the pen. "I suddenly loved the offer." Rachel smiled after he looked down. He caught it. "You enjoy this too much. Sign." He did. The new job paid better. Not enough to make Ethan rich. Enough to breathe. Enough that the truck finally got a new battery. Enough that Sophie's school account stayed current. Enough that Ethan stopped checking his balance every time he bought groceries. He still checked, just not every time. 3 months passed, then 4. The rhythm of life changed. Not perfectly. Ethan still worked late sometimes. Sophie still accused him of crimes against hairstyling. The radiator still clicked too loudly. Mrs. Campbell still knocked whenever she believed Ethan was failing at parenting, which was often. But there were evenings now when Ethan came home before dinner. At first, Sophie did not trust it. You are home. I live here at 6. That happens. No, it does not. It is happening now. She studied him. Did you get fired again? No, okay. By the 4th early evening, she stopped asking. One Thursday, Claire came to Millstone Gardens for a scheduled meeting with the new field team. Ethan was outside near the courtyard reviewing a heating report when Sophie came home from school. She saw him, then Claire. She slowed. Ethan knew that look. Curiosity approaching at dangerous speed. Sophie. She came over. Hi. Ethan gestured toward Claire. This is Claire Whitmore. Sophie looked at her. I know. Claire smiled. You do. You are on the company website. Ethan looked at his daughter. Why are you looking at the company website? Sophie ignored him. She studied Claire carefully. Then her eyes widened. Wait. Ethan immediately knew this was going badly. Sophie pointed. You are the lady Dad accidentally asked for rent money. Ethan closed his eyes. Sophie. What Claire pressed her lips together. Ethan looked at her. Do not. Claire failed. She laughed. A real laugh. Enough that 2 technicians nearby turned around. Sophie looked pleased. That was embarrassing, right? Claire nodded. For both of us. Ethan stared at them. I am standing here. Sophie looked at Claire. He gets embarrassed easily. I have noticed. Great. Sophie shifted her backpack. Are you his boss? Claire glanced at Ethan. Not directly. Good. Ethan frowned. Why good? Sophie shrugged. You argue with bosses. Claire looked down to hide another smile. Ethan pointed toward the building. Homework. Sophie began walking away. Then she turned back. Nice to meet you. You too. Sophie looked at Ethan. She is nicer than you said. I never said she was not nice. You called her terrifying. Ethan stared at his daughter. Claire raised an eyebrow. Sophie disappeared inside before he could defend himself. Claire waited. Ethan returned to his paperwork. Not a word. Terrifying. Not a word. Claire smiled. Their relationship changed after that. Slowly. So slowly Ethan could pretend it was not changing at all. Coffee after inspections became normal. Then coffee happened when there was no inspection. Claire learned Ethan hated expensive restaurants because he could never relax when somebody folded his napkin. Ethan learned Claire ordered the same simple chicken sandwich whenever nobody from the board was watching. Claire admitted she had lived in Pittsburgh most of her life but had never ridden the incline for fun. Ethan told her that was practically a crime. One Saturday, he took Sophie to Mount Washington. Claire happened to be nearby after a charity event. At least that was what she claimed. Sophie invited her to join them before Ethan could object. Claire rode the incline with them. At the top, Sophie ran ahead toward the overlook. Ethan and Claire stood behind her. The city stretched beneath them. Bridges, rivers, glass towers. Claire looked toward the Whitmore headquarters in the distance. From up here, everything looked simple. Ethan leaned against the railing. That is because you cannot hear the boilers. She smiled, then became serious. My father loved views like this. Ethan waited. He liked seeing the whole city at once. You miss him? Claire looked toward the skyline. Yes. Then after a moment, I am also angry at him. Ethan did not react. Claire continued. He built Grant's power. He trusted him. He taught me to trust him. That does not make what Grant did your father's fault. No. She looked at Ethan. But it does mean some of the things I inherited were problems. Ethan nodded. You get to decide what you keep. Claire studied him. That sounds suspiciously wise. Do not tell anyone. Sophie shouted from the railing. Dad, come look. Ethan started walking. Then Claire touched his arm. Only for a second. He stopped. She looked as surprised by it as he felt. Thank you, she said. For what? For not treating me like I was stupid for not seeing it. Ethan looked at her hand before she let go. You were not stupid. I was blind. That is different. Is it blind people can learn where the stairs are? Claire smiled. That metaphor needs work. I fix boilers. Sophie shouted again. Dad! Ethan looked toward her. Coming. He and Claire walked over together. Neither mentioned the touch. Both remembered it. Weeks passed. There was no dramatic confession. No sudden kiss in an executive office. No moment where Ethan forgot the distance between their lives. He was still careful. Claire was, too. Respect had come first. Trust had taken longer. Anything beyond that had to arrive without debt attached to it, without rescue, without one person owing the other. That mattered to Ethan more than he knew how to explain. It mattered to Claire, too. One Friday evening in early fall, Ethan sat at the kitchen table helping Sophie with fractions, or pretending to. Sophie erased his answer. "That is wrong. It is not wrong. It is. I am an adult. That does not make fractions scared of you." Ethan stared at the worksheet. His phone vibrated. He ignored it. Sophie corrected another number. The phone vibrated again. "Someone wants you. They can wait." Sophie looked at the screen, then smiled. Ethan immediately became suspicious. "What, nothing? What, check your phone?" He picked it up. "Claire, are you free for dinner tomorrow?" Ethan read it. Then the next line. "No work, no audit, no property reports. Just dinner." He stared longer than necessary. Sophie watched him. "You are doing the face." "What face?" "The weird smile." "I am not smiling, you are." Ethan ignored her. He typed. "You sure you sent that to the right Ethan?" He waited. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then returned. Claire replied. "Check twice before sending." Ethan smiled again. Sophie leaned across the table. "Who is it, nobody? You smile weird when nobody texts you." He covered the screen. "Do your fractions. They are done. They cannot be done." "They are." He checked. They were. Ethan looked back at the message. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. Months earlier, that simple action had terrified him. A name on a screen, a message. One wrong recipient. One moment he could not take back. He typed one word, "Yes," then another message. 7, Claire replied. 7. Ethan set the phone down. Sophie stared at him. "What dinner? Yes. With who a person?" Claire Ethan narrowed his eyes. "How do you know you are bad at secrets? I uncovered corporate fraud. You still hide birthday presents in the laundry closet. That happened once. 3 times. Ethan pointed toward her bedroom. "Go." She stood gathering her books. At the hallway she turned. "Dad." "Yeah, wear the blue shirt." He frowned. "Why, it makes you look less tired." Then she disappeared into her room. Ethan laughed quietly. Later that night, after Sophie went to bed, the apartment became still. Ethan cleaned the kitchen, turned off the television, checked the lock, then opened the drawer beside the refrigerator. Inside lay the old eviction notice. He had kept 1 copy. The paper was soft along the folds now. He sat at the table with it. For months he had wondered why he never threw it away. It was not because he wanted to remember being broke. He remembered that without paper. It was not because he wanted to remember Grant. He had no need for that either. He looked at the amount printed across the top. At the deadline, at the language telling him exactly what would happen if he failed to produce money in time. The notice had measured everything the system cared about. How much he owed. How late he was. How many hours remained. What could be taken from him. It had measured everything except the one thing that mattered most. Who he was. Ethan folded the paper once. He placed it inside a small wooden box, beside Sophie's first school photograph. An old hospital bracelet from the night she was born. A birthday card she had made him when she was 6. A picture of the 2 of them beside his terrible first attempt at a homemade cake. Things from difficult years, things from good ones. Sometimes both at once. He closed the box. His phone vibrated. Ethan looked down. "Claire." "And Ethan." He typed. "Yeah," her reply appeared. "I am glad you texted the wrong person." Ethan sat quietly. Down the hall, Sophie slept safely in her own room. The rent was paid. The heat worked. His job was his because he had earned it. Claire was asking him to dinner because she wanted him there, not because he needed something from her. For the first time, there was no debt inside the message, no fear, no desperation, no apology waiting behind it. Ethan looked at Claire's name, then typed, "Maybe I did not." He sent it. A few seconds later, 3 dots appeared. Ethan smiled. This time he did not worry about where the message was going. He knew exactly who was waiting on the other side.